Collins & Co.'s not-for-profit conference, Be Empowered Through Knowledge, is designed specifically for the not-for-profit sector. Our speakers are experts in this sector, and their practical approach provides not-for-profit board members and management with the opportunity to improve their skills and knowledge across a range of specialist topics. The conference also provides a great networking opportunity.
Using a result-focused approach and a pragmatic understanding of business and personal performance, Craig designs and delivers programs for teams and professionals. His experience spans banking and finance, quality assurance, project leadership, executive management, and is also a board member of Impact Volunteering, a not-for-profit volunteer resource centre servicing over 200 agencies in Frankston municipality. His topic today is Performance in the Age of Connection, why measurement still matters. Please join me in welcoming Craig to the stage.
Thanks, Frank. Thank you. I might actually stay off the stage today, which for some of you, you'll be thinking, oh, hang on, that probably means audience participation, and I'm not here for that. But that's okay. We'll work through that barrier. So, I have 45 minutes here today to talk to you about measurement, and measurement's always been something close to my heart. We'll talk a bit more about it soon, but I guess the first thing I'd start with is to ask you a question. In your organisations, whether it's your role, whether it's your team, whether it's the board, the committee, whatever you actually participate in within your organisation, do you use measurements? That's a very broad question. Can I have a show of hands, please? Excellent. Okay, good. So, importantly, measurement is something that's common. And what I'll talk about today is that the way, though, we approach measurement isn't always effective. In fact, the challenge that we have, especially in this age of connection, is making sure that our measurements serve us, that we're not serving our metrics, okay? So for those of you who said, yes, we do use measurements, please put your hand up if it's a struggle to use them, if there is a struggle to find them, if it's difficult to actually understand, now that I've got them, what do I do with this? How does it inform me? Please put up your hand. Don't be scared. Excellent, good. So in my experience, originally in chartered accounting and then through working in banking and now in not-for-profit as well, a common experience for people is that it's difficult to find the data to actually make the measurement, and then it's difficult to do something with those measurements that leads to something meaningful. So we'll talk about that today, and my hypothesis around that. So, we're in the age of connection. What we'll cover off today is, why does performance and the measurement of performance matter? We'll look at actually what is the puzzle around performance measurement, what drives it, and ultimately what threatens it. Really, in terms of the measurement and why it matters in the first place is that because we all care about what we do. We care about our organisations. We care about how our organisations serve the people who depend upon us. And that's why understanding our performance and how we can improve our performance is critical, and why measurement is so important. The puzzle is that though we are in an age where the speed of change is constant, it's accelerating all the time. And so the effort for us to simply keep up is so great that when things change, we're thinking, well, hang on, what do I have to do now? And more often than not, our measurements aren't keeping up with what's going on in our environment. That's why it's puzzling and hard. Performance really is driven by connection. And I'll talk about why also performance is driven by the most purest form of connection, and that is trust. Trust and connection are critical to great performance. But somewhat paradoxically, our efforts to connect are actually making it difficult for us to build trust. It sounds odd, but I'll show why shortly. So, when you measure things, what are you measuring? Are you simply looking at the difference between the past and the future? Are you measuring quantity versus quality? Are you measuring behaviours, or are you measuring results? Are you measuring transactions, or are you measuring relationships? And the left and the right side of what you can see on the screen is very deliberate, because typically we favour particular types of measures that are easy to do, but they're not always the best measures that can serve our future and our growth. So I'd like you just on a blank piece of paper, and I know they're out there because I can see them everywhere, grab a blank piece of paper and just write down the one metric that you rely upon the most, or the one metric that you would love to have that would inform you about how well you're doing what you do. Just think about that for one moment. And I expect silence. Or there could be some chat amongst the table. But have a quick think. What's the one measure that you depend upon, or the one measure you'd love to have if you could find the data and if you had resources to go and do the work? That's often the other challenge too. Because I want to keep that metric in mind, and we'll transform that metric at the end of this session. All within 40 minutes. It's amazing, but we can do it. It is amazing. Okay, you've got that metric down. So just briefly, my credibility, let's get that out of the way. Okay, so how come I'm here talking about measures with you? Okay, so my coach told me that I should put dangerous in talking marks because people might take it literally. When I talk about dangerous, and my book Learning Dangerously and my upcoming book Dangerous Measures, I mean that we want to do things around measurement that actually changes stuff. We want to have measures that result in an insight or a decision or a change. So those types of measures, those can be dangerous because those types of measures can actually make us feel uncomfortable with our reality. So the best measures are actually the ones that are making us think at the time that they come out, hey, maybe we need to change something here. And that's what I focus on. So my background's in, I performance mentor people in metrics and measurement now. I've previously worked as a chartered accountant. I've worked at Lean Six Sigma as a consultant, project management, executive management, and my favourite number is 8, by the way. Who else has a favourite number of 8? Thanks, Ray. Excellent. It's a great number, isn't it? Actually, the first time I heard that joke about, the 0 with a belt is an 8, yeah, I thought it was hilarious. Over time it sort of doesn't appeal so much, but 8 is my favourite number. It's a great number. That's me, and I actually am in the sea. That's not photoshopped either. That's how dangerous I am. I wear the suit in the sea. All right, so here's my hypothesis, and this is the busiest, I promise you, this is the busiest slide of the whole afternoon, or whole morning. So, but I wanted to share this with you, because this is my performance hypothesis. Okay, so, top left-hand corner, performance depends upon connections. Our best performance, whether it's personally, as a team, as an organisation, is when we're connected with our environment and we're connected with the people that we depend upon in that environment. But the rate and the type of connections that we need to be making is changing all the time, and it's difficult to keep up. So we'll talk briefly about connection. If performance depends upon connection, I then propose that connection is built through trust. The best connection we have is by the way we build trust. And trust is ultimately obtained, is gained by the outcomes that we deliver upon. And the outcomes ultimately are driven by activity. So, if though our trust, or the way we approach trust, is taken for granted, if our outcomes that we are depending upon to build trust are stuck in the past, and if our activity alone is what we're depending upon to actually improve our performance, then we've got a problem. And that's why we need to shift our measurement, shift our measures for ones of just simply measuring activity to ones that actually become dangerous and inform us about the quality of what we do. That's the key message here, the quality of what we do. So typically when I go into organisations, one of two things I see. Organisations have no metrics, or they have too many metrics. And the organisations that have too many metrics don't know what to do with them, and the organisations that don't have enough metrics actually don't know how they're performing. And then there's a heap of organisations in between that sort of flip-flop. What we need ultimately is to measure the things that can build trust through the organisation, through our people, and with our stakeholders. Measures that actually inform us as to how well we're managing that trust That's ultimately what will result in improved performance. And why is this important for you? Because in your organisations, you have a lot of activity, a lot of decisions that you need to make that are dependent upon what you know about your business, what you know about how well you're connecting with your clients or your customers or your stakeholders or your regulators or your people. And if you don't have those measures in place, you can't be making informed decisions, which inevitably leads to waste and inefficiency and an erosion of trust. So your brand, your positioning, your funding, your resourcing, investment, success, the future of your organisation, it depends upon your ability to understand what's going on. And I propose that a lot of the metrics that we're using, the ones that we see and then actually do nothing with, they're worthless. And it's because we're not truly trying to understand and identify measures that can help us build better understanding about our organisation. So let's talk briefly about the connection age. How do we get to this connection age? What have we learned? What are we ignoring? And what's this thing that I call the connection bind? So we've gone through a lot of change. Last 200 years, industrialisation, gone through then a process of then scientific management as to how to measure organisations. We've gone through the post-industrial age, the technology age, the information age, the digital age, and now we're in this age of connectivity. And it's huge, and it's huge. Globally, it's amazing. It's astounding at the volume of people that are moving around the world, the shift to GDP growth, looking at the flows of trade and finance, tourism, migration, how we're using data, and amongst all that, we've just got this increasing volatility in what's going on around the world and how we manage the data. And that's on a global scale, but I dare say, and I know because we experience it in my not-for-profit and in the businesses I work with, there is not at that scale of volatility and change, but there is still change going on in this age of connection. So the question for you is, how do you actually stay connected with the people that matter in your business? What do you do? So can I just ask, all of you are sitting with someone else on your table. Just for a minute, can you just talk about what do you do? Share with the other person or people, what do you do to stay connected with the people that matter for your business? Just 1 minute. Excellent, okay. I'm very good at measuring time, although some people say I'm not that punctual. So who had go out for coffee? No? No one had go out for coffee? Okay, all right. So one suggestion, can I just have one suggestion from any of you? What's one thing you do? And I can guarantee whatever you say is the right answer. Pick up the phone. Whatever. Professional, what's that professional?
Professional, I usually ask my clients and anybody else is, how is it best to connect with you?
Great.
And whatever they want to do it, I do it.
So what are the different ways? What are the different ways they say?
They love me for it because instead of me saying, oh, but I prefer this, and it doesn't suit their needs, it all goes back to the client.
Excellent. That's such a great point, and thank you for sharing by the phone too. I think old school is getting more important in terms of staying connected with people. I know how frustrated I get when I can't find a person to talk to. But that's a great point, and we'll go back to your great point because at the end, everything needs to be purpose-driven from the perspective of the end user, the client. Yeah, sure.
This is not that pretended
Yeah.
to react to the I needed to be.
Yeah, sure. But exactly, because you're not there to serve yourself. Exactly, right. Very good. Thank you. So how you stay connected is important, and by understanding then our clients and understanding our business, it should be informing us as to how we continue to build connection and trust within our business. So here's the bind though. This is what I see time and time again, the problem. So there are three actual causes of what I call the connection bind. So connections appears easy, all right, but staying connected and actually building the right type of connection with your key people in your business and outside of your business is a struggle because of three things that I see. First of all, the digital age. And I know Matt's coming later on to talk about smart digital, well, that implies that there's dumb digital. And invariably, right, I see a lot of, myself included, doing digital in a dumb way. And so we have this delusion that digital is the saviour for everything. If it's done right, I'm sure it is. But a lot of us don't do it well. Secondly, there's this temptation around urgency, that if I'm urgent, I'll feel good. And I see urgency running rampant throughout organisations. And then there's the addiction to activity, and that is just trying to get the urgent stuff off our to-do lists. And when these three things combine, and I see them time and time again, we create these three falsehoods: the false expertise, the false success, and the false efficiency. And this is what I see as being one of the main reasons why organisations struggle to get themselves organised around measurement and understanding their business, because they're continually chasing themselves around these false delusions. That if I just put digital in, if I'm just busy saying yes to everything and getting urgent, and if I'm just ticking off stuff, that I'll achieve something. And you do achieve something, but actually it typically doesn't end up in better connection with the people who matter. So we need to avoid this connection bind, and the best way to do it is through getting dangerous about our measures, measuring the right things that really matter for our business. So, are we really connected? And what does really connected mean? So, do our connections actually achieve something? How do we know when we're really connected? In my experience, really connected means that we've built trust. And trust is critical to the health of the business, both internally and externally. So, we've got here because we've gone through a lot of change, and we're now in this connection age. We learnt that, yeah, look, networks is important, purpose is important, understanding our clients is important. What we ignored was that, along with that, our measurements need to evolve. We can't just be relying on the things that we measured when we first set up our business. It's got to evolve. But we're suffering from this connection bind. We're getting caught up in the age of connection and everything that it offers us. And it's deluding us. And we need to get back to understanding what are the critical measures that actually help us understand our business and build connection and trust with our clients. And that's what we'll talk about now. So trust is the key to high performance. So I do a lot of things in my business. One thing I don't do as much of is research. So I rely on researching other people's research and duly crediting it. And around trust, one of the gurus is a guy called Paul Zak, who's written about the neuroscience of trust. And the research that he's done is significant, and it continually shows time and time again the importance of trust. I mean, if we could have any one of these things in our organisations, I'm sure we wouldn't say no to it. In particular, the one that's most important there is that trust in high-performance organisations will lead to 76% more people engagement, the motivation of your people. And invariably, in my experience, that actually is clearly correlates with a lot of the other aspects there. When people have high motivation, there is higher productivity, there is more energy. So I think there's some correlation there. So the number one that I would focus always on is how can we actually increase the engagement of our people, because that also then rubs off on the experience of your customers. You'll see it all the time. And Paul Zak talks about 8 management behaviours that are critical to then instilling trust. And I would challenge anyone here, and anyone not here, that could any of these management behaviours be enhanced by better measurement of our business? How do we know how well we are sharing information broadly, intentionally building relationships, inducing a challenge stress? That is where we're actually challenging our people to step up and then supporting them through that process, because we know that actually gives them more engagement and builds more trust with them. These are all great things, but the only way we can actually achieve these things and understand the impact we're making is, again, by thinking differently about how we approach measurement. So we need to measure what we do, again, to understand how we can build our trust in our organisation. That's really critical. But trust is the purest form of connection. Collaboration is a good aspect too, but I'm not talking about collaboration today. Trust is the critical to great connection in this age. So, measurement then, in my hypothesis, is the bridge to trust. So the number one reason why you need to focus on improving the measures that you have and making them more meaningful for your business is that you will build trust from that, because you'll understand your clients, your people, your stakeholders, everyone better by getting better measures. But what measures do we actually choose? And we'll talk about that now. So when you think about how measurements evolved over the century, the last sort of 150 years, two particular aspects of it has been that, back in the early sort of industrial age in America and the early sort of late 1800s, early 1900s, was a real focus on what was called Taylorism, the work of Frederick Taylor and scientific management, which was very much about looking at the efficiency of the work. And then throughout the last century, we began to change our approach to how we motivate staff and looked at cognitive and behavioural psychology, looking at how we actually increase engagement. So we're looking there at the meaning of work as opposed to the results. Both are important, both are critical. And some organisations I can see have a tendency to favour one over the other, often depending upon the nature of the service they provide. What I propose is that you need to do both. You need to be very clear about getting measurement of both. What are the results and what's the meaning of the results, to have that holistic view of your business. And so I propose the 4 quadrants of measurement, and I'll take you through this now. So traditionally, I suspect this won't be a surprise to you that most organisations focus on measuring quantitative data, typically because it's easily available, it's there. It's typically a byproduct of just doing what we do day to day. So it's a simple measure, it's typically the starting point. Unfortunately though, sometimes it's also the end point. And it's very much focusing on just simply results. So it's focusing on the quantitative, the quantums, the volume of what we've done. And unfortunately that's regularly misused in that is often used to then extrapolate some projection of the future, which is poorly argued. What we can do though is then, the other point I make here is that the other weakness around quantitative is it's typically in the past. So again, to use that past measure and say, well, this is what it means to the future again, is poor in its use. So if we were to shift our thinking and say, okay, well, let's focus on something that actually has more meaning, we typically would look then at qualitative. This is where we focus from the activity to understanding what's going on. So they're actually still focused on the past, but there's a better understanding of what could change in the future if we listened to the qualitative feedback. Beyond that, though, we can actually look future-focused. And this is the step change that I see that organisations need to take and that I work with in organisations to help understand. So I propose that, again, if you focused on results, but you started to take a future view, you basically move into this quadrant that I call the productive quadrant, where we're looking not so much quantitatively, but what can we produce into the future out of our past results. So we enhance measurement to enable the performance improvement, not just measuring the quantum, the quality, but we then actually look beyond to focus on this concept of energy, and I'll give you an example shortly. And finally, the ultimate measure is where we begin to measure things that help us become predictive about the future. And that's in the performance quadrant. So we're looking at meaningful metrics that give us meaning about what we're doing, that's also future focused. So a simple example of that is, let's say, looking at clients. All right. So I've gone into organisations where their number one metric that they measure success by is the number of clients they have, which it makes sense. It makes sense if they're in the business of actually keeping clients. But again, what does that tell us about the future? Very little. When we start then asking about the satisfaction of our clients, we then begin to understand, well, what could we do? It gives us more meaning about the relationship we have with our clients. But again, it helps us perhaps then think about, well, what could we do differently to continue to increase the number of clients we have? What's even better, though, is then, rather than just measuring the number of clients, we measure the number of new clients. So if we can progressively show over time the reason why that we're actually getting more clients or less clients, again, it gives us more of a I guess, an understanding, information about how we can influence that outcome into the future. And ultimately, if we're measuring the number of clients who are in fact advocates for us, kind of like Net Promoter Score, then we're actually going beyond the other three quadrants, because we're understanding and we can predict if we can influence these factors that matter the most to clients, for them to be advocates for our organisation, our operation. Okay, so now we're actually knowing what we can do to continue to increase clients over time. It becomes a lot more meaningful. So that shift from just simply looking at the number of clients we have each month to then simply looking at, I know this is a simple example, but it's just to make a point, distinguish between the quadrants, to where we can actually understand which of our clients advocate for us and why, is a big shift in understanding. It's a big shift in connection, it's a big shift in looking at what we can do to influence trust amongst our clients. Yeah?
Client advocates, I know you measure it all, you know, what the rule is, you get your rights, customer service, 2 or 3.
Yep. Yes, that's right. It is, yes, it is. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is understand, and that's a really good point. Thank you for making that point about customer satisfaction. That's what we're trying to do. The difference between satisfaction and advocacy typically is that a satisfied customer won't necessarily come back again, and they won't, as you suggested, they won't tell their friends and family about you. Whereas an advocate will actively go out there and promote you. And that's why there's been a big movement in the whole Net Promoter Score system over the past sort of 5 to 10 years in Australia and the last 20 years in America. So again, measurement is the bridge to building trust. Measuring the right things, measuring the activity to get meaning and to become predictive about our businesses is going to enable us to build trust with our people and our clients and our stakeholders, because we'll be measuring the things that inform us about what matters, what really matters. And then we can actually direct resources into the things that really matter, that make a difference. So, dangerous measures aren't just about the numbers. So dangerous measures are what I refer to, these measures that actually prompt us to think differently about our business and to drive us towards building more trust. And dangerous measures, they address the need for being predictable, to have the opportunity to predict and to be able to actually understand if we change X, what the result will be, okay? They measure performance at 3 levels. At the quantum, which is typically the activity, at the value, which is what the customer wants from us, how well we satisfy them, and also at what I call the driver level, which is what are the behaviours in the organisation that we need to achieve what it is that's important for us. And typically, organisations get stuck on the quantum, measuring just simply the activity, what we've done. So we produced X number of widgets, or we serviced X number of clients, and they leave it at that. And they don't look any further as to what impact there was on those, what was the quality of those widgets, or what was the impact on those clients. That's simply it. And then we just measure it again. If it goes up, that's good, and if it goes down, well, that's probably bad, but we probably won't actually report that. I've seen that happen too. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to provide the link between the results we're getting and the meaning of the results we're getting. And when we actually achieve that, then it enables us to make better decisions, understand the right behaviours, and also informs us about the beliefs that we have about our organisation. So just to explain that, ultimately organisations are a mixture of purpose, process and people. And when we begin to understand our purpose and our process and what that's producing, we begin to understand the value that we create. And we actually are measuring the value for our customers. So when our processes are producing something that's purposeful, that serves our customers, and we measure that, we know we've got a customer lens on, and that's important. When we produce measures of activity, the quantums, people and process, that gives us an understanding internally of what we're doing. And I'm not saying that quantitative measurement's wrong, it's not, or quantitative measures are wrong. They're not, they're important. but they're not something that we can use to then build trust and build understanding of our future. They're simply just telling us what we've done. We still measure them because they help us understand efficiency, but we've got to leave it at that. We've got to move on from those. And when we begin to measure the drivers, that is what's going on between the people and what we do, our mission, our purpose, that's our internal people and our customers, we begin to understand the behaviours and the mindsets that we need to motivate as part of our business as well. And so ultimately, it is this measurement of value and the measurement of the quantums that help us make better decisions about the direction of our business. It's the measurement of the quantums and the drivers that help us understand the behaviours that are important in our organisations for our people to drive the business. And when we measure our drivers and our value, that's helping us around the beliefs that we hold around, again, the organisation and its outcomes. So these concepts are really very much business focused, and they're helping us to understand the dynamics between our purpose, our process, and our people. So I use the performance tree. This is the method that I use with my clients around building out more meaningful metrics. And it uses the analogy or the metaphor of a tree because typically there are three parts to the tree that need to be understood. The quantum, again, is about the measurement of quantitative measurement. It's just measuring the things that happen. If you cut a tree down and you look at the rings, you'll know how old it is. You won't necessarily know what type of tree it was, what value it served. It'll just give you a number, and that's pretty much it. The value of a tree actually is the canopy. The value of a tree is the shade it provides. It's the aesthetics. That's where the value truly lies. But deep down below the roots, below the surface, the roots are actually the drivers of the tree's performance. So I use this analogy just to help make it clear the distinction between the quantum, the value, and the drivers. And so when we actually build out metrics in organisations, when we sit down and we look at what's being measured, typically we would find most of the metrics sitting at that quantum, around the trunk. So we measure X, Y, and Z, it's historic, it's activity-based, and it gives us no information about our future. It doesn't actually inform us about what decisions we should be making, whether we're providing value to the customer, or how our people feel about the work they're doing. So we need to actually move up above the quantum and begin to measure the value that we deliver to our customers. And at the same time, we need to deep dive down into the drivers and understand what are the behaviours and mindsets of our people that are important to us achieving what we want to achieve. So remember, going back to what we talked about before, we want to keep this balance between results and meaning. But we also always want to ensure that we're focusing on the end user. That's critical. That's critical. So, an example of this is if we look at, for example, behaviour. So the behaviour is informed by the drivers and the quantums that we measure. So we measure the motivation, this is just an example. We measure the motivation of our staff to follow up expressions of interest. So this actually was a live example. So had a client who had a help desk where people would come in and express interests for volunteering at a help desk in a library. And there was no follow-up. So they would mark off that, yes, we've had 90 people come in this month expressing interest in volunteering, and that was the metric. Now, that's an interesting metric, but what's come of that? And so there was no follow-up of expressions of interest. So again, and that was the way it had always been done. And I'm sure when they set up the desk, that was the most important metric to be working out, well, do we keep this desk going? Well, probably, if we get a certain number of people coming through, we'll keep the desk going. But that's not the metric to use to understand how well you're serving people who want to come in and ultimately volunteer. So the shift was then we measure the motivation of our staff to follow up expressions of interest. That's the drive, that's the behaviour we want. For it informs our behaviour to initiate contact with new clients. So the interesting thing was, once we started telling desk staff that they needed to follow up clients through a call, there was resistance because people hadn't volunteered to do that. People didn't want to make calls. They wanted to actually fill out forms, but only a few of them wanted to actually make up the calls. So we began to see a difference in behaviours that we could accommodate. But importantly, we understood then that we needed to make sure we had the right people on the desk doing the follow-up calls to make the follow-up call worthwhile. So simply by changing the way we looked at the metrics we were using and how they served the business, we began to see the need for segmenting activity amongst staff, and that we needed to ensure that we actually were matching up skills and activities, roles, effectively. And that informed the behaviours. So then, if you look at the decision section there, the difference between value and quantums, we measure the count of new clients per month, the quantum, for it informs our decision on how to improve our client engagement. So whilst we were still focusing on the number of clients that we were getting per month, that actually was then used to understand, well then, why did they join? What was it that attracted them to sign up to us by getting feedback? So by actually going out and doing a follow-up interview or a call, we could understand what was the point of difference that got them over the line. And again, that meant that we actually had a metric now that was helping us understand what we could influence into the future to continue to build clients out. And the third one around belief, the difference or the distinction between value and drivers, we measure the engagement of our staff with our mission, for it informs our belief to serve the client. So again, we went back and we were looking at exactly, did the staff understand our mission? Did they believe in it? Did it feel good for them? And when we actually began to understand that better, we could see that in fact there were differing opinions about what activities were meaningful for them and whether it served the purpose of the organisation. So again, simply by digging a bit deeper into what we thought was going on and by coming up with metrics around the engagement of staff, around the follow-up rate and the outcomes from follow-ups from clients, and then also looking at what was the driver of new clients coming on, we began to see different perspectives of the business and where, typically, when we have limited resources, where we could best use those resources to improve the performance of the organisation. So that's just a quick example there. We've got a couple of minutes now, and what I'd like you to do is, again, spend maybe two or 3 minutes to think about your organisation and that metric that you wrote down originally, the metric that was either a metric or measure that you use already, or one that you'd hope to use. And what I'd like you to first do is think about, well, does that measure, is it focusing on the value for customers? So is it measuring a concept around value for customers? Is it measuring a quantum, just activity around the operations? Or is it measuring a driver? Is it an indicator of behaviour within the organisation? So once you've actually, I'll give you another second to work that out. Looks like you've all worked that out. So put up your hand if your metric or measure is one that's in regards to the value for the end client or user. Excellent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. Good. What about quantums? What is your metric actually measuring activity around the organisation, within the organisation? Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. 6. Great. And are any actually measures measuring behaviour or the drivers or mindsets of your people within the organisation? Excellent. Great. Excellent. So what I'd like you to do then is, now that you've got one of those 3 covered off, think about how you could extend that. So if your focus was on driver, what's a related quantum that actually supports that? and what's the end outcome for the client or the customer that you're serving that actually would be related to what you've measured around the quantum and the driver. So getting back to the previous example, the driver was that the staff were prepared to actually follow up client expectations or client expressions of interest. The quantum then was simply as a result of the number of new clients that we were getting on as a result of follow-ups, and the value was that we were actually understanding what was important to the client to feel engaged as part of that service, bringing them on board. That's how we sort of connect those three, because for every measure, we'll actually connect those three together. So have a quick think about what it is that would be the two other measures. I'll give you a couple of minutes. What it is would be the two other measures that would be related to your measure that you've identified. This is, I'm not going to preempt how hard or easy it should be. You've got 2 minutes of effort around that. So just have a go and think about what are the other two missing metrics that would cover off all three aspects of that measure: the driver, the quantum, and the value. Okay, so we're running a bit short of time, so don't want to hold you up from your next presentation, who could possibly be better than mine. That has happened before. Just some great points here. Look, this process, it's an important one, and where I've applied it, invariably what's happened is, in the first month, we would typically cut metrics down from about 12 to about 3. In fact, I always go in and say, hey, let's just limit it at 3 measures that we're going to do. One at the driver level, one at the quantum level, and one at the value level, and let's get good at measuring those. And invariably to be honest, there is some new effort around trying to source data or find data, typically engaging with your client. But you do save, where you have got a mature measurement system in place, you do save time, because invariably we'll cut 7 or 8 at least quantum metrics out of the system, because they simply don't actually provide you with that understanding of connection, understanding of trust, and understanding of the business and what's important to build connection and trust. I wish I had a bit more time just to run through your thinking there, but interestingly, I am offering, as part of the end of day prizes, a full consultation around this with an organisation. So hopefully, I can't do it for all of you, but you might win my services, which would be excellent. Okay, so very quickly, key points. Sorry, Ray, just key points. Think about your measures. Think about what you're measuring. Do they serve you, or are you serving them? We'll just leave it at that. I actually have a book coming out in July called Dangerous Measures. Funnily enough, it is related to this. If you like this, and if you want to look at my post on Facebook this afternoon about this event and how much I enjoyed it and being here, and you make a comment, good, bad, or otherwise, I will send you 2 free books once it's out in July. So please, let's get engaged about this. I love this topic and I love helping organisations. Just look up Craig Stevens, performance coach. Yeah, you'll find me. You'll be the only guy on Facebook who's sitting in a suit halfway up in water. There's not many of those photos around.
Thank you, Craig. Is there any questions for Craig?
Thank you very much.
Working through all of these measures and the way that you deliver your program and your methodology, who do you work with?
Who do I work with?
Yeah.
Okay, so who owns the measures in your organisation?
Who owns the measures?
Yeah.
Our business operations manager.
Okay.
She manages.
So I'll work with her.
Right.
To start with, yeah. Yep.
No, I actually.
Is that what you meant? Or
No, that's a great point. I'll do that too.
Right. Who else do I work with?
Yeah, who do you work with in order to create the mental capacity and this? Because I'm intrigued, because all of this takes a certain level of mental vision
Yes.
to deliver.
Yep.
So who do you work with in order to create this vision?
Oh, who created this?
Yeah.
I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's just all my thinking.
Can I win that prize this afternoon?
you
please?
can.
That'd be great.
Well,
Yeah, I'm just intrigued because it's obviously it's very clear. Today, I think yours is really clear around your measures and what that means. The meaning behind the measures is relatively new thinking in my for what I do in my
so
work.
as I said, I've spent 20 years in numbers. And I've seen them used in different ways, and it's just basically a combination of that. And as I said too, looking at research around what's important for business. Yeah. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Craig. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed your talk.
Thanks, Craig.
Can we just please welcome me in thanking Craig.
Thank you very much.